Hello, everybody, and welcome to Keeping It Spiritually Simple. I am your host, Sandra, and I have the awesome pleasure and honor of having Sharon Lynn Wyeth on our show today. She is the creator and founder of Know Thy Name, and it's decoding the letters in your name and all the secrets that it reveals. So, hello, how are you?
Welcome. It's so nice to join you, Sandy. It's just fabulous.
Well, it's awesome to have you here. So, Know Thy Name, my goodness gracious, that's a lot. That's a lot of information. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means? And I know that it's scientific, so it's not like, you know, writing stuff down and figuring it out differently each time, but tell us a little bit about it.
Well, the reason it's scientific is when I was explaining, I wanted to be able to trademark the name namology. And when I was doing it, they said, the trademark company said, look at how you created this. And because it's duplicatable for the same results, it's actually a science. So we're only going to trademark it if you name it namology science. And so that's how it got the science part in there. But I was seeing patterns in kids' names as I, was doing seating charts and everything. And so, I was interpreting their names. So I knew that my brain had picked up some kind of pattern. And because I'm a math major and I have my master's, my brain is thoroughly trained in patterns. And so I was a challenge to figure out what is my brain figuring out and how do I make it conscious from the unconscious. And so that's how it started. But what's really interesting about names is that there's so much information, Sandy, in a name. For an example, the first name is the essence of who you are. The middle name is where you go when you're under stress, if you have a middle name, because that's when we know that we morph. And the middle name indicates what we were learning and what we carried forward for our most immediate past life. If people don't have a middle name, it's because they either died and reincarnated really quickly, so it's not important, it's like over, or they use so much time on the other side of the veil that it's now irrelevant. And then the last name represents our environment. So we have both nature in our first name and nurture in our last name. And then as you start to break things down, the first letter in the first name is the first impression. The first vowel in the first name gives a lot of information. It's like how we communicate, how we show that we love somebody, how we receive love and feel love, what needs to happen to make a long-term relationship versus a short-term relationship, our learning styles, how we purchase, we know what causes us to buy, how we do relationships. There's so much loaded into that first vowel. And then we have the last letter of the first name. And the last letter indicates our lasting impression, or what I jokingly say is what they're going to talk about you behind your back first. Okay. And so that's our lasting impression. Then the other letters in the name are the middle letters. And those are the letters that are more subtle. And it takes us longer to get to see those attributes in somebody once we've met them. And then besides the singleton letters and their placement that's important, you have double letters and triple letters together. And those letters are also really important because if you're sitting next to somebody that you really like, you're acting one way. But if you're sitting next to somebody that you don't care for, we act differently. Okay. So it's the same thing with the letters. It's like every letter has a personality. And when they get together, then they determine how they act differently. And the example that I like to give is in the C and the H. So I have a mnemonic device to remember everything. So the C is charming and charismatic to cover their need to be in charge and in control. Okay, so that we don't mind so much when they're in charge and in control, but that's when they're more comfortable. And then there's some letters around them that can make them even more controlling. So then we have the H, and the H is the holy letter. And that means you kind of get in the stream and you go where it takes you, and you just trust God's going to put you in the right river and get you out at the right time. So you're letting go and letting God. Now you put a C next to an H. And it doesn't matter if it's in the front of the name like a Cheryl, or in the middle like a Michael, or at the end like a Micah. It doesn't matter where that CH is. And so it just simply means that you do things the hard way. And the reason you do things the hard way is because you've got this internal struggle going on. When do I hold on and be in charge? When do I let go and let God take over? So you're constantly having this tug of war inside yourself. So that's an example. And so when you learn to read a name, you also learn to read the 2-letter combinations. Or sometimes there's a 3-letter combination, like the TRI, like in Patricia or Patrick. The TRI combination literally says that you're going to have a challenge with resources. Are you spending your money before you get it? Are you thinking of how you're spending it so it comes into the pocket and out of the pocket right away? How are you using your resources? So that's a challenge. So there's 2-letter combinations and 3-letter combinations. And in my book, Know the Name, Know the Person, what I call the middle school chapters, the middle school is always hard for everybody. That's grade 6, 7, and 8. And the subtleties in these combos are in chapter 6, 7, and 8. And so if somebody's talking to me, I always say, read the book up until chapter 5, then skip 6, 7, 8, start with high school in chapter 9. If not, you're going to get bogged down, and just use those middle chapters as resource. And other of my friends had said, make that a separate book. And I thought, no, that's not fair. I have fairness issues in my name, because then you'd have to get 2 books to get the whole system. And that's not right. And you would not all the personality in one book so that you get the whole system in one book. Anyway, when we compare names with somebody else, we can see why they're in our lives, where we're going to get along, what we have in common, and where we're going to conflict. And the greatest thing, Sandy, is that if you know where you're going to conflict, your names also say who's responsible to make sure there isn't a conflict and what needs to be tweaked. It's not hard. It's not like you have to do a personality change. It's just a tweaking. For example, the majority of people, and some people especially, do not like to be told what to do. They don't mind being asked, but they hate being told. Okay, so if you have an A in your name or an R in your name, I'm going to say, or even a first vowel of an O, make sure you're asking the person, you're not telling the person. Because when you ask, you get cooperation, and when you tell, you get resistance. Okay, and then there's little things like, let's say they have a first vowel of an O. So they like to be the boss. They like to be the ones in charge. Well, they hate to be nagged. So if you're going to keep reminding them of something, it's going to keep going on the bottom of their to-do list, and it's going to get procrastinated more and more, just because inside they have rebellion against getting nagged. Where if you just go up and say, hey, I'm so glad you said you were going to do this for me. I so appreciate it. Thank you. Then it gets up higher on their to-do list. So it's interesting. There's commonalities in how they're expressed that is just really nice to know when you're meeting somebody and you want to keep that relationship going. Because we look at it and we can do little things that we don't even realize that we're doing, and the relationship gets tanked. I mean, I watch my own reaction sometimes when somebody will say something and I'll think, oh my gosh, that just jarred me. And then I have to say, okay, that's my issue, not theirs. Settle down, keep listening, but a lot of people won't do that for themselves and say, settle down. They'll just go, okay, I need to get out of here. I need to walk away. There was when I was a school administrator, there was an English teacher that I got to observe teaching. And when a child would say something that would, just shoot everybody off the wall, she would look at them and go, let's try that again. Try saying it this way. I don't know if that feels that much better. Try saying it this way, and they'd make a game out of it while she was really teaching everybody how to say something. So in Know the Name, Know the Person, what I really like about the book is it goes about instructing how different people are going to react, so that you literally are given suggestions on how to say things so that you can say what you want to say, but say it in a way that everybody can accept what you're saying. As it's giving that personality. And then, of course, it'll say whether you care or not to take that extra effort to do that. That'll be in our own names. And I just look at it that the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our life, because it doesn't matter if you're poor or rich. If you have poor relationships, you're troubled. And if you have rich relationships that are really great and you have fun interacting with people, your life is very much enriched and a whole lot happier. And so the whole purpose of getting to know somebody's name and how to interpret it is so that we can know who they really are and choose to interact and how we interact, and know how to treasure our relationships and make them special instead of tearing them apart and not even realizing what we're doing.
I think this is so valuable for parents, children, friends, any relationship. If you can start at a younger age, understanding some of this ways to communicate. My mother would always say, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. That was always her thing about it. And of course, having 5 kids in 5 years, everything sort of had to be like, get in line, whether you like it or not. I'm going to say it nicely so everybody follows. But this makes so much sense. But I can see how this would work so well individually going, like, let's say I learned it all and I can now have relationships with people in a better way. How would you instruct a group of people if you needed to give assignments or like classroom settings or workshop settings, things like that?
There's some commonalities that we all have. For an example, what I already gave was ask, don't tell. Okay. There's some things that are just easier for people to accept. Okay. Because our whole thing is to believe in someone when they're having a hard time believing in themselves. And if we all uplifted each other, imagine what this world would be like instead of trying to tear everybody down.
Yeah.
I mean, I happen to live in an area, and I've moved 53 times now. And I happen to love this particular area because only once, and it's the second longest I've ever lived anywhere. Okay. Which is like, I'm almost at 5 years. And I've only once heard somebody not talk nicely to somebody else. Everybody is so polite and kind in the area where I live. And it's just joyful, where I've been in other areas and it's very hard to hear kindness. And I just feel like if we knew how to be kind and consider the other person and not just ourselves and make our words match that, our world would be such a better place. And you don't have to like people. You can have people that you don't like, but I still think it's important to be polite to that person and be kind to that person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To me, that's mutual respect. I think that kindness towards other people, you don't have to be friendly, like as in like they're going to be your best friend, but you want to have a dialogue that I think is beneficial to both. So in other words, you're doing no harm right out of the gate.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because I look at it that when you know somebody's name, you know immediately, is this person beneficial to be in my life, or is this person not beneficial to be in my life? And you're going to recognize that there's certain names that people have that just rub you the wrong way. And it's like every time this name shows up in your life, you go, oh, not another one of these. And we all have those. But the beauty of it is that you can see why that name rubs you the wrong way. And so you can take action against it, type of thing, not against the person, but against your own, restriction or reaction to that name. You can say, oh, this is what bothers me in this name. So why does it bother me? I mean, I always think we see our own worst faults in somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that if something bothers me in somebody else, I got to look at myself.
Sure.
Okay. And so when you have certain names that keep showing up in your life that kind of rub you the wrong way, it's great to be able to look and immediately say, this is what bothers me in this particular name, this combo. So what am I going to do about it so it doesn't bother me anymore? And the coolest thing when you're talking about BFFs is that so many people, after I've done a name reading for them, because people feel like I know them, okay, that there is that closeness and that intimacy. And so many people go, can you be my new BFF? Because how wonderful to be understood. And the people that have taken the classes from me, every single one of them has said, I have stopped judging or evaluating anybody around me because I can see all the potential and I can see what they're working on, what they came to experience, and the judgment goes out the door. You start having compassion for everybody around. Nobody's on a pedestal and you think their life is perfect. Nobody's in the dumpsters. All of us have gifts. All of us have talents. And the greatest gift of learning the system is that judgment goes away and you start looking at everybody else as human and with compassion and wanting to be of assistance.
Absolutely. I was just thinking about when you were saying that, if you come across a name that you're like, not one of those again, how do you have a better relationship with that person? What if you have to be with that person for a period of time? So how do you have a better relationship? So if you understand the way their name is, you release the judgment, you know what they're here to experience. It allows you to sort of detach a little bit from your own stuff. Would that be correct?
Yes, you become the observer, and you learn their speaking style so that you can talk to them in their speaking style. You can still say what you want to say, but you say it in a manner that they can hear it. Okay, so we all have challenges in our name, but there's certain challenges I think are more challenging than other challenges.
Mhm.
So let's say somebody has in their name that they're not going to be honest and tell the truth. Okay, you wouldn't go up and say, "Oh, I don't want you in my life. You're a liar." I'd rather run away. Instead, you can, if I'm giving a name reading, I just look at them and go, so you got a challenge with the truth. How much truth do you want to tell? You want to tell 5%, 50%, 95%? How much truth? Which was really helpful when I had kids in the classroom, especially when I became an administrator and they all come in wanting to get away with the crime that they just did, type of thing, with that bad behavior. And I think, we're having some challenges here with the truth. So you're telling me this percentage of truth, but what I'm really aiming for is a higher percentage. So let's try again, start over. And as long as you don't call somebody a liar, which is insulting because they're embarrassed that they got caught.
Yeah.
So instead of calling them that, you just say, okay, we need to up the ante of truth here. And what I have found is most people laugh. It's like, okay, I got caught, big deal. Here we go again. And so you learn how to communicate in such a way that whatever the challenge is in the other person's name doesn't rub you the wrong way so that you stop being humane.
So this is wonderful for just meeting people randomly, for people that you work with, for people that you might be teaching or learning from. I mean, I've been in classrooms before where I'm just I want to run for the door, and if I had maybe understood their name better, perhaps I would have, I don't know, bought a little more patience before I got in there to sit down, because that's one of my big things is who's selling the patience. I'm here to buy, But so would that be really beneficial to understand that, or if you're broken up into teams to work together, or it's always those ones that you're elbowed in the closest that I find after a period of time rubs the wrong nerve.
Yeah, but if you knew how to address the issue that was rubbing you in, the wrong way, in a way that the other person could hear you, it makes it so much easier to get along. So you're saying it respectfully. Okay, I'll give you an example. I had a chicken coop built in my backyard last weekend. Okay, so every time the guy who did a great job would talk to me, he wouldn't talk to me, he'd yell at me. And after about the fourth or fifth time he was just sitting there yelling at me, I looked at him and I said, is somebody that lives around you hard of hearing? And he stopped in his tracks, and he goes, why? What do you ask? And I said, I'm questioning why you keep yelling at me. I said, when people yell at me, I want to shut down and I stop listening. And I'm really doing my best to keep hearing what you're having to say. But with you yelling at me, I'm finding me shutting down. So I'm curious why you're yelling at me and why you find that necessary to yell instead of just talk. And he goes, oh, yeah, well, my girlfriend has a real hearing problem. And I said, okay, well, I'm not your girlfriend. And so you can talk to me. You don't need to yell. Can we try that? Let's see if it works. And every once in a while over the weekend, I'd say, okay, I'm not across the football field. I'm right here. And I have really good hearing.
So do you think that he learned to just adjust his volume because of the way you were able to speak to him?
Well, he didn't shut down and he didn't quit and he didn't want to not finish the job. And at the end of the whole job, he goes, I really like you and I want to do a good job for you. So, come out and look. and see if there's anything else that I didn't do that you would like done.
Nice.
You know, I mean, he didn't have to compliment me. I'm an employer, you know, but it was nice because I don't want to be yelled at. I don't think it's necessary. And I don't think he realized he was doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
You
would
know,
make
so
total
that also
sense.
helps him with his other relationships, because I'm sure if he's yelling at me and he doesn't know me, he's yelling at others also.
Awesome. So how does this differ from, say, like numerology? A lot of people do numerology based on name and all that stuff. How does this differ from that?
Other than finding out like what time or what year in your life is going to be emphasized on what, you don't use numbers at all. Just because I was a math major, people go, oh, it must have something to do with math. And I think, no, it's the literally placement of the letter. You're only looking at letters and how those letters interact with other letters. Now, in numerology, you get 3 numbers from the name and you get 3 numbers from the birth date. In nameology, my science, you don't need a birth date. You don't need, you know, in numerology, you need the other person's cooperation because you need to find out their birthday and able to have a clear pattern. And in nameology, the minute they've introduced themselves, you're off and running. And I often will say when I meet somebody, and how do you spell that? Because there's so many creative ways. As they're spelling, I'm analyzing. So by the time they get through spelling their name for me, I know who I'm talking with.
What if you come up with someone who's being called their middle name as their first name or their nickname, and you don't know their real name, so that you're like, I don't know why I don't like them, but we're not getting along very well, and then you realize, oh, that's because they're using the wrong name.
Okay, it's the right name for them or they wouldn't be going by it. Okay, so every name tells us something. When somebody's going by a nickname, often it's somebody else who gave us that nickname. We often don't give ourselves nicknames. And it says, those are the qualities and the characteristics that that person is comfortable seeing in us and not the others that are, you know, no longer represented because they're not in the name that they're calling us. Okay. And so what happens is we can subconsciously morph and not show them that part of who we are. So when you're calling somebody by their full name, their given name, you're literally saying, I am accepting all of you. When you shorten it, cuten it, whatever, you're saying, I'm accepting a part of you. And this is the part I want to see. Okay. Then if they go by their middle name instead of their first name, the middle name was what they came to do in the most immediate last life here on earth. And so they're saying they're repeating that instead of moving forward into the letters of their new name. So
now,
they're getting a do-over.
So like, for example, my twin sisters never liked their names. So they were always trying to change their name and use part of maybe their middle name. So what's that about?
Okay, so if you're always trying to change your name, it's saying I'm changing how I'm going about the blueprint that is written in my birth name. So your blueprint for this lifetime, when things are going to happen, when you're going to have challenges, some of the easiest years, some of the most challenging years, you know, what you can expect to experience in any time period is literally written in your name. And that birth name does not change. Whatever that birth name is, that's your blueprint. So when you're changing your own name, you're saying, I'm changing how I'm going about satisfying the experiences that I came to have on my blueprint. So for an example, suppose on my blueprint, it says, I've got to figure out how to get from LA to New York. Okay. So I could walk. It would take me the whole lifetime maybe to get there, but I could walk. I hitchhike. I could stop and earn some money and catch a bus ride or a train or an airplane. And your name always says, here's the route to the airplane and to get here fastest. It always gives you the easiest route. So when you're changing your name, you're changing how you're going about your blueprint, but your blueprint has not changed.
Wow. Holy moly. So this has a lot of advantages. This has a lot of advantages to understanding that. Can you talk more about the advantages? Because I'm just like, I'm thinking of all the scenarios of my life, my relationships, the ones that worked, the ones that didn't. I mean, if I knew some of that, I mean, that's just an advantage to understand that. So that's a light bulb moment. So what would be some of the advantages of understanding this?
Well, when you understand, like for an example, when I changed and had dropped my maiden name and went to my married name, okay, at that time I had not known all of namology science, but there were things happening in the marriage after 7 years, and 7 years is a cycle. That means that if you've gotten a new name, it's like an hourglass of time, and the sand drips for 7 years, and you've fully integrated the new name at the end of 7 years.
Mhm.
And so, and until then, you're slowly becoming from that new name. And I got to understand later what the combinations meant differently when I changed my last name, because that meant I was bringing a different kind of person into my world. And what I didn't realize is I was also bringing in violence. But now I can identify that in a name. Okay. So I consciously chose I didn't want to change my last name until my kids were out of school, so there wouldn't be any confusion for them, you know, when the mom comes in or whatever. But the minute both of my kids had graduated from college, I literally created my own last name so that the people that came into my world are now, I want to say, more compatible with me, and my whole life changed.
Wow. So you created your own name, like a new name.
I totally made it up. And what I thought was really funny, Sandy, is when I went in, the judge calls you in at the end of the paperwork time period that has lapsed by, and they say, you know, why do you want to change your name? And all I said was, this is my married name. I'm no longer married, and I don't want his name. And my kids are out of school. I waited to get the kids out of school, and now they're out. So I don't want his name anymore. And he said, fine. Nobody said, are you going back to your maiden name? Did you make up a name? I mean, I think there's a lot of assumptions that people go back to their maiden name, but it doesn't matter. You can change your name to anything. And I made mine really compatible with where my blueprint is and what I choose to experience on a soul level, so that now the people that are coming into my life can assist me in that regard.
That is amazing. So I'm just going to speak to this real quick. So, you know, I married young, a couple of years later, had a daughter, a couple of years later, found myself needing a divorce. And one of the first things I did was drop that name and just go back to my maiden name. And it was in the 80s, and divorce was not prevalent then. And so people were saying, no, why are you changing your name? You should keep it because it's your daughter's last name. And I said, well, what does that matter? Because if I remarry, my name will change again. So that's not my name. That's her name. So I stood for that. The second time I got divorced 20 years later, I put into the decree to change my name, but I was going to create my own name. And when it came time for the judge to say, so you put in here that you want to change your name, and I'm like, I had reluctancy on it. And then he said, well, it doesn't cost you anything if you do it now, it will later. And then I thought, oh, I'll just leave it with the combo of the two names anyway. It's on my passport, my license, and all that. And then this past year, I mean, I had been doing some writing with the Mick Ellis. And this past year, I went into Facebook and changed it, created my YouTube. I mean, I put my own Mick Ellis together instead of McLeaf Ellis. So I created my own name. So am I changing my blueprint?
Your blueprint never changes. How you go about your blueprint changes.
Okay.
Okay. So when you did your changing from your two last names to one last name, and you dropped some letters out, you dropped out letters that would say you would bring deception to you and people who didn't want to follow the rules. That's what you got rid of.
Oh, and I did not know that. Well, maybe intuitively I did, but not scientifically, but know the name.
Right.
That is
But that's what
amazing.
you were dropping out.
That is amazing. Now, if I was to look at it in this way, maybe I would have done it 7 years ago, because it would have been almost 7 years ago that I had that opportunity. Isn't that funny, with the sands of the hourglass?
Right. But maybe 7 years ago, you weren't ready to give yourself that opportunity.
Yeah. Now, let me ask a question. Do we choose our name, or do our parents choose our names?
Okay. In the beginning, when there were not very many religions on the planet, they all agreed that the incoming soul impresses upon the one naming them what they want to be called. So we all name ourselves. And at one time, everybody knew that. So we're naming ourselves. We cannot blame our parents. We can thank them for getting it right.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I know that some people will have a name picked out, and then when they meet the baby, they'll change the name because it just didn't fit them. And so
Right.
that's kind of cool.
Well, some people, instead of getting it before the soul is here, needs to feel the energy of the soul and have that better, clearer communication with the soul of that child once that physicality is present.
Mm-hmm. Now, what if we're attracted to names? Like, for example, I named my first daughter Kelly, and I spelled it with the Irish spelling. And I liked that name probably from when I heard it maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Well, actually longer, because that's how old she is. But I didn't realize I had a higher guide. I had a guide, a 6-dimensional guide by the name of Kelly. And as soon as I heard that from a reading a couple years ago, I went, that's why I felt like the soul that came through me, my firstborn, was a Kelly. Does that make sense?
Yes, but that also is the way that your daughter impressed upon you, this is the name that I'm choosing.
Even before she came in.
Before she even came in. So she associated with something else, with the energy and the vibration that you were already familiar with.
Wow. This is amazing.
You know, we do the majority of our free will choices, Sandy, before we come here. What people don't understand is we get, with the assistance of our master guides, to choose our parents. Our parents say, I'm willing to have a child. We're the ones that get to pick them. Now, if we're not happy with our choices, that's not our parents' fault. Okay. Every once in a while in a name, it'll show up and say, well, okay, we really appreciate our parents, but we simply did not like their methodologies. But we appreciate what we learned. And other times it shows up that these people had an incredible, time with their parents, and how fortunate for them. And others, it's like, oh my gosh, how could you stand being there? But we choose it for whatever we choosing to experience this go round. Okay, because everything has its purpose. There's no mistakes in this. Mm-hmm. So first we start, we choose our parents. Then it's like we get all the possibilities between their DNA, what you're going to look like. So you get to go, I look at it as a huge shopping mall. You get to go to the eye store, and here are all the combinations of eyes you can have from these two parents' DNA. And you go, oh, I want that pair. And then you get to go to the nose store, and you see all the combinations of noses from these two parents. You go, okay, I want that one, and then you're going to the eyebrow store. So you go to the shape of the head, you do the body, the health, the everything. You're choosing that for yourself before you ever come into the physicality. And you're making agreements with other souls. Hey, would you play this role for me? I need somebody really rotten to come in here and do this nasty, mean stuff. So I learn I don't want to do that to others. So would you be that negative person for me? And it's usually our best friends in the soul world that are willing to be nasty, because that's a hard role to play.
Yeah.
And so if you look at it, that you prearranged meetings for the key people in your life, you've prearranged what you look like. It was so funny when I was growing up, I ran around, first of all, 3 of my sisters either modeled or they were in magazines, for salespeople, whatever, gorgeous people. And then the other sister and I would look at each other and go, and what happened to us? And my mother would look at us and say, hey, you chose how you wanted to learn. Don't blame anybody else. And when my 2 best friends in college was the freshman princess and the sophomore princess, the football princesses and the good looking women. And I remember coming home and telling my mom, I said, I feel ugly all the time. Look at all these beautiful people all around me. And nobody's going to stop and go, oh my God, look at how gorgeous, whatever. And my mother said, it's such a simple solution. Everything in life has a simple solution if you just look for it. And I said, great. What's my simple solution? And she goes, find ugly friends, then you'll look the prettiest. Next. It was just like, why do you have an issue? You picked how you wanted to look. If you're not happy with it now, you only have you to blame. And so, I had a very enlightened mom with spiritual principles, which I was very fortunate about.
Mm-hmm. Which you chose.
which I chose.
Mhm.
And, you know, she has a challenging personality. But the experience I got from having to learn how to deal with that challenging personality has helped me so much as a school administrator, because some of those parents have really challenging personalities, especially when they're upset at their kid, but want to take it out on the administrator.
Oh,
You know, I
yeah.
mean, she trained me well, you know, even though I didn't enjoy it as a kid. And
So it sounds like those experiences, you were able to master some of the experiences that you came in from choosing your mother.
I think we all get opportunities to master. And then it's up to us how we look at it and how long it takes us. But our
Mhm.
name indicates when that's going to become a priority, or when that's going to become an easy focus for us to master. And then what it is we came to master.
This is fascinating. Well, audience, this is so fascinating that I am going to go and have a session, and then we are going to do part 2, and we're going to talk a little bit about that session. And then we're also going to talk a little bit more about in depth with Know Your Name. So thank you for coming on, and we'll see you guys on part 2. And I'll have all the links in the description for you all to book your session. All right. Thank you.